Welcome back, everyone. Second week, Isaiah, all right? All right, so a quick recap of just where we left off. Isaiah is a prophet, and a prophet is not about fortune telling or foreseeing the future, even though on occasion that comes into the mix. A prophet is fundamentally tasked with the responsibility of being a spokesperson for God. A prophet is meant to communicate what God is thinking or what God has to say to people in a current situation. So, what the prophets of the Old Testament predominantly did was not go and rub their crystal ball somewhere and try to come up with guesses of what's going to happen in the future, but were to take the words and activities of God that they knew and apply them to the people as God would guide them along in the process, as God's Spirit continues to do today. And you've probably seen that there's some people who are really, really good at it, and some people who just suck. I mean, they can't do it to save their life. Well, it's no mistake that the New Testament calls prophecy a spiritual gift. And it's a gift that's alive and well today. And God had granted various people through various times and places this gift of prophecy, and Isaiah happened to be one of these men. If you read the Old Testament prophets, you'll see they come from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of walks of life, all kinds of situations, and all kinds of current crises. Isaiah was a court prophet, functioning a lot like an advisor would function to a president or a prime minister or something today. He was a cabinet member, if you will, because of course they didn't operate, forgive me for saying this, but with the delusion of a separation of religion and life like we do today. They just operated with a concept of reality. And if God was real, then seeking God's will had to be a real part of trying to figure out how to navigate reality, not just something like, well, that's cool, you do that on the side because you like some old songs or because it makes you feel good inside. And so Isaiah operated in the king's court, 4 kings actually, and I brought my just lovely penmanship back for you today to review. The king Uzziah, if you can see that as a letter U, it is. Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Their reign spans 104 years, though certainly we shouldn't expect that Isaiah was like that old doing it that long. He probably came in near the end of Uzziah because he dies in chapter 6 and may have seen it to the end with Hezekiah. Who knows? Though there is a tradition that Isaiah was martyred under his son Manasseh by being sawn in two. Again, did that happen? I don't know. At least before that, he had the privilege, but I would say the burden, of being the one entrusted with speaking to arguably the most influential person in Judah, the king, to try to guide him in the way of God and apply the insights and ways of God to the crises that he was facing. And the big crisis that surrounds the entire book of Isaiah and that you have to situate all Isaiah in is the nation Assyria. This is not Syria like we think of it today, but Syria. Not Assyria like one of many Syrias. It was actually called Assyria. And Assyria was the big nasty superpower out to the northeast, like all superpowers of their day and, well, arguably any day, bent on a certain sense of world conquest. And of course, world conquest would kind of work like this. We would go and flex our military might and try to subdue the nations around us so that their money would become our money, their resources would become our resources, their strategic location would become advantageous to us. And as long as you kind of paid up, shut up, and showed up, the conquering superpower would probably be okay with you. But as soon as you would start to rebel, show signs of dissidence, find yourself slow. Well, it's kind of like falling out of favor with the mob. That they're quick to do a favor for you, but your knees are getting broken if you don't pay on time. And Assyria was one of the nasty ones that was just known for their violence. The entire book of Isaiah is situated in the Assyrian crisis. Now, some of you who know Isaiah a little bit more might be going right now, wait a minute, I thought Babylon was the big enemy that everything from Isaiah 40 to 66 is really about. Well, yeah, Babylon factors in. But Babylon factors in as a future thing that Isaiah sees being interpreted in light of what they're facing with Assyria. So, we have Assyria who's sweeping on down. Here is our lovely map of the Middle East, right? This is kind of Turkey up here. This is the Sea of Galilee, Jordan River, Dead Sea. There's Jerusalem. And Assyria has already swept in like this, following kind of a fertile crescent, if you will. You don't go across the desert. Your troops die if you do that, right? Coming across this way. And what they've done is they've already subjugated the fractured kingdom of Israel all up here. That was a crisis earlier in the book of Isaiah, and Israel fell. And chapter 36, where we picked up last week, says, in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, this is the king of Assyria, made war on all the fortress cities of Judah and took them. So Judah has just lost all of its strategic defense, and all that remains is Hezekiah, holed up in the city of David, otherwise known as Jerusalem. This is kind of the Alamo moment. It's the last stand against all of this. And I really want to encourage you, try to contextualize this to today. There's no easy way to make a one-to-one correlation, but try to kind of get into the position of fear, the mindset, the real geopolitical crisis going on for this little fledgling kingdom. What is it comparable to? Maybe those of you who lived in the Cold War can kind of think of the Soviet threat. But that doesn't even do it justice, because the US and the Soviets were at the very least equal powers at the table, if not the US being even stronger through it. So it doesn't quite capture it the same way. Might it work today? Think about being in Hong Kong with China coming in upon you, and you're this fledgling city that has enjoyed some level of independence, but now the power to the north is starting to impose its will. And what's it like to be a citizen of that country? I don't mean an expat who can fly out on the next available flight, but someone whose passport is from there, whose homeland is there. But I don't even know if that does it justice. Try to put yourself in the shoes of being alone. And everything around you is coming to crash down and threatening you. And you can't hold it off anymore. And you're called to lead a people through this, to do what's right, to protect them. And you're trying to figure out the best way and the most God-honoring way to do it. If you can climb into that mental space, you'll start to understand not only what it was like for Hezekiah, but the people under his lead and the burden that Isaiah now has in guiding them. Well, let's see where it comes to crisis mode. And we're going to read from the beginning of 36 just to kind of catch up, because we only got, 6 verses in last time? It's the 14th year, maybe 714 or 15 BC, though secular sources would date it to around 701 BC. What's 12 years among friends, right? Who cares? But we see Assyria coming, and he sent his general, the Rabshakeh. Give me a Rabshakeh. It's, okay, all of you give me a Rabshakeh. Thank you, Brooke, but come on, there's more of you here. Rabshakeh. It's good to get it on the lips, right? It's a title. Like we have titles like general, right? Ambassador. Okay, this is a title. It's an emissary sent from the king of Assyria. Most people think it means like chief of princes or something like that, so it's a high up. The Rabshakeh, accompanied by a huge army from Lachish, to Jerusalem to King Hezekiah. The general stopped at the aqueduct where it empties into the upper pool on the road to the public laundry. And 3 men went out to meet him. Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, basically the chief of staff. Shebna, the secretary, the one making sure that we get an accurate record of everything that's going to transpire. And Joah, son of Asaph, the official historian or your constitutional lawyer, the one who knows the legal precedents and what's happened in the past and kind of can refer to those things to help guide us with wisdom. The Rabshakeh said to them, "Tell Hezekiah that the great king, the king of Assyria, says this: what kind of backing do you think you have against me? You're bluffing, and I'm calling your bluff. Your words are no match for my weapons. What kind of backup do you have now that you've rebelled against me? Egypt? Don't make me laugh. Egypt is a rubber crutch. Lean on Egypt and you'll end up flat on your face. That's all Pharaoh, king of Egypt, is to anyone who leans on him. And if you try to tell me we're leaning on Yahweh, isn't it a bit late for that? Hasn't Hezekiah just gotten rid of all the places of worship, telling you you've got to worship at this altar? And that's where we left off last week. We've left off with Hezekiah trying to figure out a way out of this mess. And if everything has been conquered to the north and the northeast, and there's nothing that exists out here but sand, you look for an ally to the south, Egypt. And the irony that the people who were oppressed by the Egyptians in their history are now looking to Egypt for their very salvation. And of course, Assyria isn't dumb. Sennacherib knows this and he starts mocking. What do you think Egypt has against me? Egypt is nothing. It's like Hong Kong looking to New Zealand. Sorry, New Zealand, if you're listening today, but, against the force and might of China. It's just not going to stand. And then he turns it personal and theological. And don't think you can claim help from Yahweh. And by the way, that's what it says here. It's Yahweh. Anytime, I'm using the Message translation, and I highly recommend it, by the way, for reading Isaiah. It will take your reading of Isaiah from a frustrating experience to, I think, an edifying one. But if you have capital G, capital O, capital D, it's just washing out the name Yahweh in the original Hebrew. And if you have capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, and more of our traditional contemporary translations, NIV, whatever it might be, that's also doing the same thing. But it's interesting that he's known by name. Sennacherib, or the Rabshakeh, I should say, refers to Yahweh by name. And he goes, and do you think you're going to rely on Yahweh? Isn't it a bit late for that? Hasn't Hezekiah already turned his back on Yahweh by destroying all the high and holy places? Well, he didn't quite understand. Just like in any international diplomacy, there's always a lot of misconceptions and misunderstanding. What Hezekiah really did was he went through and destroyed all the idolatrous places. But what the Rabshakeh sees, what Assyria sees is, no, he's just ticking off gods left and right, and he's destroying all these places. Well, to them, it's like, well, you ticked Yahweh off, right? What help do you think he'll bring? It's funny that even though he's wrong, the accusation or the question, doesn't it still resonate? I don't need show of hands, but, you ever been in that place? What help will Yahweh bring? What help will Yahweh bring because of? What help will Yahweh bring because I? What help will Yahweh bring If you followed God at all, you've probably lived in that territory at least at some point in your life. So look at what he says, the Rabshakeh. Be reasonable. Be reasonable. I'm here with a huge army, but no, come on, just be reasonable. I'm not looking to torment you for torment's sake. Be reasonable. I'm not looking to kill you because I delight in this. So just kind of work with me here. I'm offering you an olive branch. It's been said in spiritual warfare, it will often come in one of 3 forms: bribery, intimidation, and compromise. Watch for those 3 in this narrative as it unfolds the temptation to compromise, the temptation to take that which you're offering that is good, and the temptation to fold under fear and pressure. Watch for all three. Be reasonable, face the facts. My master, the king of Assyria, will give you 2,000 horses if you can put riders on them. You can't do it, can you? So how do you think, depending on flimsy Egypt's chariots and riders, you can stand up against even the lowest ranking captain in my master's army? Now, just so this isn't misunderstood, because it can be a little bit confusing, what the Rabshakeh is doing is taunting Hezekiah and trying to show him just how powerless he is. What he's basically doing is showing up with a huge army, and he goes, you want to try and stand against me? Fine, go for it. I'll even give you 2,000 horses that you could put riders on that you can use to fight me. It's kind of like when your dad challenges you to basketball when you're like a 5-year-old kid, and he gives you a 10-point lead. You know, that's kind of what he's doing here. Oh, you want to go for it? Fine, I'll even give you a 10-point lead, and you're going to see how futile this is. You can't even come up with 2,000 riders to put on my spare horses. Or maybe 2,000 horses was the size of what Egypt was offering. You can't even put riders on them. And you think Egypt is going to help you? Do you see what's going on here? And besides, do you think I came all this way to destroy this land without first getting Yahweh's blessing? It was your Yahweh who told me, make war on this land. Destroy it. Let's pause. What do you think about that? What's your initial response to hearing that from the Rabshakeh? Great trash talk, isn't it? It feels like great trash talk. Brooke, how'd you put it? He's lying, right? Is it possible? Yeah. Here's what's problematic. From Isaiah 6 up through Isaiah, well, not quite Isaiah 6, but like Isaiah 7 up through this point in the narrative, God has actually told the people of Judah and Israel that he is going to raise up foreigners of strange tongue to come in and be his hand of judgment and deliverance in various ways against the people of Israel. Most of the book of Isaiah is actually about God trying to tell Israel how he is going to use these pagan people of pagan speech and pagan power and pagan tongue as his instrument. And the key mode of deliverance, actually, when we get into Isaiah 40, is going to be one of these people that he calls by name, but we'll get there in Isaiah 45. So, is it trash talk? Is it lying? Or another alternative. Is it trash talk and is it lying despite the fact that ironically it's nonetheless true? You ever notice how someone can lie about something even though it's true because they think it's false, but they're going to lie anyway and ironically they're actually right in their lie? You following me here? It's welcome to politics, right? It's the level of subtext going on, but this is, be it the trash talk, the taunt, or strangely enough, whoa. He's saying something that Isaiah has already told us in years past. What's going on here? And what does that mean for us existentially as a people? Did God disinherit us as a people? Is God actually handing us over as a people? Is our security in Yahweh not what we thought it was? Raises a lot of questions, doesn't it? Especially when the army's outside your gates. Let's keep going. 92. So, it picks up, and I don't have verses here. It's 36. Yeah. It picks up, and again, I don't have verses, but Eliakim, Shebna, and Joah answered the Rabshakeh. Remember the court people that are out there? I love this. Please talk to us in Aramaic. We understand Aramaic. Don't talk to us in Hebrew with an earshot of the people gathered all around. The Assyrians spoke Aramaic. Aramaic was the lingua franca. It was like the national language, the English of its day. It was kind of like the universal language of trade and things like that. So Why do you think that our friends Eliakim, Shebna, and Joah don't want the Rabshakeh speaking in Hebrew? Scare the people, right? We don't want to rile up the people. We don't want to plant ideas with the people. We don't want to scare the people. We don't want to create panic and riot on our hands among the people. So let's discuss in a language they don't understand and kind of keep this among us at the politically elite level, more or less, and spare us that pain, you know? He replies, "You think my master has sent me to give the message to your master and you, but not the people clustered here? It's their fate that's at stake. They're the ones who are going to end up eating their own excrement and drinking their own urine." That isn't just hyperbole. You guys are all familiar with the concept of a siege, right? You have a city like Jerusalem, and it has castles, with towers, and you all kind of wall up in there because you really needed this drawing here to help you, didn't you? So, isn't that beautiful? Yeah, that's for you. That's for you. So, you're gathered here with your army, right? You've surrounded the city. Well, I don't know. Who seems to be in the advantageous position? The people running at the wall or the people inside the wall, right? It's the people inside the wall. How many men do you have to throw at it? Do you want to run against the wall while they're dumping hot oil on you and shooting you with arrows and hurling rocks at you and doing whatever other kind of nasty things they do? So the typical thing that you would do is you just kind of set up a perimeter right outside of arrow shot. You would set up a perimeter, nothing in, nothing out. And the point is, it's just a war of attrition. You starve them out. You get them to the point where they run out of food, you run out of water, disease kind of takes over, and they would throw dead cows in there and stuff like that to try to spread disease. And at some point, does this army break or does that army break? Right? This was the whole aqueduct discussion we had last time. And you could read it in the Bible and just the sieges that they faced, but throughout history too, where the people would get so hungry. It comes to this. Deuteronomy even warns the people that it'll come to the point where mothers are eating their children and things like that. And so he's trying to strike panic, speaking in Hebrew, to the hearts of the people. It's their fate at stake. They're the ones that are going to end up eating their excrement and drinking their own urine. Then the Rabshakeh stood up and called out loudly in Hebrew, the common language, "Listen to the message of the great king, the king of Assyria." He's now addressing the people directly, right? Don't listen to Hezekiah's lies. He can't save you. And don't pay any attention to Hezekiah's pious sermons telling you to lean on Yahweh, telling you Yahweh will save us, depend on it. Yahweh won't let this city fall to the Assyria. He's trying to stir up dissent. He's trying to stir up rebellion. He's trying to stir up a pressure of the people to capitulate. Don't listen to Hezekiah. Listen to the king of Assyria's offer. Make peace with me. Come and join me. Everyone will end up with a good life, with plenty of land and water, and eventually something far better. I'll turn you loose in wide open spaces with more than enough fertile and productive land for everyone. Don't let Hezekiah mislead you with his lies. Yahweh will save us. Has that ever happened? Has any God in history ever gotten the best of the king of Assyria? Look around you. Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Lands that Sennacherib already conquered. The gods of Sepharvaim, lands and territories and gods that Assyria already conquered. Did the gods do anything for Samaria? Name one God that has ever saved its countries from me. So what makes you think that Yahweh could save Jerusalem from me? The three men were silent. They said nothing. For the king had already commanded, "Don't answer him." Then Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna and Joah, the court historian, tearing their clothes in defeat and despair, went back and reported what the Rabshakeh had said to Hezekiah. And that's the situation they find themselves in. And hopefully the narrative, the story, is enough to speak for itself. This clear and present threat, this impending danger, this doom, this hopelessness, and this despair of the last of the promised land, the last of the kingdom of God, if you can put it that way, against something that all logic would dictate we can't defeat, we can't get out of, we can't get around. What do? You look for help in Egypt, they're a step ahead of you. You create buffer states through Samaria, he's already taken them over. What do? Well, I'll tell you what they did. They tore their clothes. And in defeat and despair, they went back and told the boss. And that's where we find ourselves. So, in chapter 37, it continues the narrative, and I'm going to save my voice at this part. Someone mind reading? Okay, thank you. So they go and they tell Hezekiah the report. And it's penitential, like repentant is what penitential means. Puts on these clothes of like mourning and these clothes of just brokenness and these clothes of, they would do it very symbolically in that day. You've heard of like sackcloth and ashes. This is what it's kind of getting at. So he sends them, all of them also dressed in penitential burlap, to the prophet Isaiah. And they say to him, Hezekiah is saying this, and look at this line. Do you think your God heard what the Rabshakeh said? Is that line a little bit odd to you? Okay, flush it out. What feels like 5 degrees off center here? Why isn't it Hezekiah's God? It should be Hezekiah's God, right? But look at how Hezekiah thinks. Hezekiah is one of the good kings of Judah, by the way. One of the few good kings recorded in Judah's annals. But one of the points that we've been making is that you're going to see even the good king or the best of the kings, it's gotten so far afield from God's desire that a lot of this, shall we say, judgment that comes in is because of what the people, shall we say, merited or chose or decided to go the path of. You could put this any kind of number of different ways and it'll have different nuances, but I think you're with me in where I'm going on this. Hezekiah, in this moment of fear and crisis, he sees Isaiah as the holy man. He sees Isaiah as the man who knows Yahweh. It's your God. It makes you wonder, is he just kind of speaking a lament? Is he just kind of speaking out of crisis? And he's like, oh, Isaiah, help me because you know him better? And is it more innocent like that? Or is it in the moment of crisis we're finding out that Hezekiah, while having followed the advice of Isaiah in many ways, nonetheless really didn't go from his head to his heart in terms of his connection with Yahweh? I don't know. You can play that out. I encourage you to think about it and maybe even read the annals of the kings and things like that to see what you think in the storyline. But it is a fascinating turn of phrase here in this moment of crisis that might reveal something of Hezekiah's mindset or thinking. And Isaiah's like just news back is just like awful, right? Don't you hate it when people say this? It's like, don't be upset. Don't worry about it. You know, I've got an army outside here speaking in Hebrew, and all my people are wrestling, right? Don't worry about it. I will personally take care of him. And he even tells him how it's going to happen. All right? Now, I would love to know the timeline here. Is this playing out this narrative over a matter of hours, days, weeks, months? I don't know, but it really kind of changes just the emotional tension, if you will, of the decisions that have to be made and how this plays out. It's amazing with God, isn't it? When you look at your crises in retrospect, they're so easy, aren't they? You see how God brought you through? Doesn't mean you want to go back. But you come out on the other side, and you always see the hand of God on the other side. Often, not always. But when you're in the middle of it, right? Minutes feel like they're months, don't they? And you're trying to figure out what to decide, and there's this horrible, horrible tendency of God to not really say wait, but to put you in a position where you just have to. And you find yourself day by day, every morning yearning for evening, and every evening yearning for morning, as the text put it earlier. Going, when are you going to show up? When are you going to end this? Faltering, wavering, weakening, tempted. This is a very living crisis here. Let's not just turn it into dead print on a page. Whatever the gap, it says that the Rabshakeh left and found the king of Assyria fighting against Libnah. He had gotten word that the king had left Lachish. Just then the Assyrian king received an intelligence report on King Tirhakah of Ethiopia, that he's on his way to make war against you. So on hearing that, he sent messengers to Hezekiah with instructions to deliver this message. Don't let Yahweh, on whom you so naively leave, deceive you, promising that Jerusalem won't fall to the king of Assyria. Use your head, look around at what the king of Assyria has done all over the world, one country after another devastated, and do you think you're going to get off? Have any gods of these countries ever stepped in and saved them? He's repeating it all, right? Even one of these nations, my predecessors destroyed. Gozan, Hera, Rephes. He goes on. The people of Eden who lived in Telassar. Look around. Do you see anything left of the king of Hamath, the king of Arpad, the king of the city of the Seraphaim, the king of Hena, the king of Eva? In other words, I got to go. Don't you get your hopes up. It's the bully saying, I'll be back, right? It's exactly what it is. Right? He's got to go attend to these other matters that Isaiah said, by the way, oh, don't worry, he'll get a report that he has to deal with something. How did Isaiah know this? Well, I don't know how to climb into the mind of a prophet. Was it revealed to him supernaturally? Did he see it in a vision like he saw many other things? Is there more intrigue and stuff going on at a ground level? God works through all these kinds of ways that you'll see through the prophet Isaiah. I don't know. But Isaiah gives him this promise. And Hezekiah leaves, but leaves with a threat. Then Hezekiah prayed to Yahweh. Now the message will say, God of the angel armies. I love this translation. And there's even a modern worship song that played. I think it's a Chris Tomlin song, isn't it? Yeah, whom shall I fear? I want to unpack this because depending on your translation and your history, you might know this phrase without even realizing that you knew it. Who here is using the message right now? Okay, just about everyone. So someone who's not using the message right now, what is your translation here?
From the New International Version.
NIV.
O Lord Almighty, God of Israel.
Okay. So it's the O Yah Almighty. That is what this is doing, angel armies. Now, no one here is using KJV, huh? No King James aficionados among us who just... Because you have 1,000 Bibles with you, don't you? Yeah. Yeah, give it to us. I think KJV does it this way, but we're going to verify. I can't tell you what verse. It's in the middle. 15-ish. 16. So we have Yah of hosts here. All right, so we have God of the angel armies, God Almighty, Yahweh of hosts. Here's what I thought KJV was going to do, but it didn't. Other older translations will do this. Have you ever seen this one? Yahweh Sabaoth. Is that familiar to anyone? No? Okay, then I'm creating an issue where there isn't one. I was going to go down a rabbit trail. I'll just let it go. All right? The dynamic meaning of what all these, this is Hebrew. And the word hosts, you know, I think of a host, I think of going to a fancy restaurant and there's someone there like in a tuxedo who brings me to my table, right? That's not what the word host means in a biblical context. The way it will use the word host is to talk about your ranks, your army, your legions, however you want to kind of put it. That's your host. So Yahweh has a heavenly host. It doesn't mean a bunch of people attending on him. It means he commands legions of angelic armies. Does that make sense? Even Jesus talks about this, remember? Don't you think, he says, what is it, to Pilate or is it to the chief priest? I don't know, it's in the Passion account somewhere. Don't you think right now I can call on God to send 12 legions of angels to deliver me? It's fascinating when you see one angel destroy all of Egypt. What does a legion do, right? So Yahweh of hosts is a sign of power. But if you just say Yahweh Almighty, well, that's a boring word. You need the image, don't you? It's the Yahweh who commands that army behind him. An image I like that helps me, though I still don't think it does it justice, is if any of you are Lord of the Rings fans, and you might remember, I think it's the Twin Tower, the two towers, where Aragorn has to lead the army of the dead, and he's standing there. I'm seeing blank stares. I'm going to let that one go down that rabbit trail too. Whatever. Grow your own imagination in your own way on this and try to make it happen. Hezekiah prayed to God, Yahweh of the angel armies. How does he think about God? I bet you say, dear Father, right? You think of God as dear. He's dear to me. He's my dad. I'm mocking it a little bit now. I don't really mean to, because those are amazing titles and so needed. But if that's your only conception of God, it's limited. How's Hezekiah calling out to Yahweh today? No, you are the one who doesn't command these armies. You're the one who commands an infinitely larger army that can surround that army that surrounds me. You are the God who can deliver me. You are the God who can save me. And I don't mean from your sins. Oh, that's central, but that's not what he's talking about here. You're the God who can actually save me and my people from what we're facing in very real ways. Oh, Yahweh of the angel armies, enthroned over the cherubim angels. Cherubs are not fat babies in diapers. If you want a picture of the cherub or the cherubim, the best you're probably going to get is in the first several chapters of Ezekiel, and you can just go slum there on your own afterwards, all right? But they are horrific, they are giant, they are monstrous, and they are fierce. You are God, the only God there is, God of all the kingdoms on earth. You made heaven and earth. Listen, O Yahweh, and hear. Look, O Yahweh, and see. Mark all these words of Sennacherib that he sent to mock the living God. It's quite true, O Yahweh, that the king of Assyria have devastated all the nations in their lands. They've thrown their gods into the trash and burned them. No great achievement, since they were no gods anyway, gods made in workshops, carved from wood and chiseled from rock. An end to the no gods. But now step in, O Yahweh. Oh God, save us from him. Let all the kingdoms of earth know that you and you alone are Yahweh. Whether this is Hezekiah coming to faith, or Hezekiah coming back to faith, or Hezekiah just expressing his faith, I don't know. But isn't it just like the coolest prayer of someone in crisis, especially a leader? And then Isaiah, son of Amos, sent this word to Hezekiah. God's message. The God of Israel. Because you brought King Sennacherib of Assyria to me in prayer, here's my answer. Yahweh's answer. And I don't want you to underestimate what he says right here, what Yahweh says right here. Because you brought this to me in prayer, here's my answer. I meet many people who theologize themselves into a place that goes, since God knows it all anyways, God just is going to do what God wants, and God has it figured out, and prayer is just about me feeling better. It certainly makes a lot of logical sense, but it's just not the biblical picture. The biblical picture is that God actually changes. God responds, and God will differ in his approach depending on, well, oftentimes prayer. Don't underestimate that. Don't underestimate the power of that. And wow. How many times do we just underestimate a simple conversation with someone and what that can do in effect? And now the God of the universe says you can affect me. Yeah.
I think this way that Hezekiah is describing God is also influenced by Isaiah's chapter 6 experience.
Yeah, it probably is.
Testimony to the king is reflected in this also.
I mean, yeah, if he's had I'm not going to flip back to the page, but how many years of listening to Hezekiah, growing up even in his own father, like now it's old man Hezekiah, who's his grandfather and his father. Sure, I mean, there's life lessons that he can be drawing on here. Yeah, probably. She has no use for you, Sennacherib, nothing but contempt, this virgin daughter Zion. She spits at you and turns on her heel, this daughter Jerusalem. Isn't that great? Are you following it? The she is Jerusalem, right? So this is God's message to the people of Israel. Do you see what the message is doing? It seems like it should be a message to Sennacherib, doesn't it? Here's the message, Sennacherib. She has no use for you, Israel. It's not who the message is given to. The message is given to Hezekiah. What is the message doing? By the very act of speaking it, it's creating that which it is prophesying, right? It's saying she has no use for you. It's not saying don't have use for it. It's not a command. It's stating it like it's a done and accomplished already. It's meant to say, this is your attitude. This is what God says. Yeah, this is where you're at. You don't think you're there, but you're there. This is where you're at because of what I'm about to do. Follow? Kind of how that works? She spits at you and turns her heels on you, this daughter Jerusalem. And don't blow past virgin daughter Zion. One of the key metaphors used in the Bible for idolatry is adultery. And we're like 800 years into the game already since Moses, 7 to 8. And if there's anything that's been true over the last 700 to 800 years, it's idolatry on the people of Israel. Put another way, they ain't no virgins. Follow? But do you see how God refers to them anyway? Do you see what God does? Is he just saying this to make them feel good about themselves? No. Does God do something more? Who do you think you've been mocking and reviling all these years? Who do you think you've been jeering and treating with such utter contempt all these years? The Holy of Israel. You've used your servants to mock the master. You've bragged, with my fleet of chariots, I've gone to the highest mountain ranges, penetrated the far reaches of Lebanon, chopped down its giant cedars, its finest cypresses. I conquered its highest peaks, explored its deepest forest. I've dug wells. I drank my fill. I emptied the famous rivers of Egypt with one kick of my foot. Haven't you gotten the news that I've been behind this all along, Yahweh speaking? This is a long-standing plan of mine. And I'm just now making it happen, using you, Assyria, to devastate strong cities, turning them into piles of rubble and leaving their citizens helpless, bewildered and confused, drooping like unwatered plants, stunted like withering seedlings. I know all about your pretentious poses, your officious comings and goings, and yes, the tantrums you throw against me. Because of all your wild raging against me, your unbridled arrogance that I keep hearing of, I'll put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth. I'll show you who's boss. I'll turn you around and take you back to where you came from. Isn't this like some old Bill Cosby, thing where I brought you into this world, I'll take you out of this world. He's giving the message to Hezekiah, but it's all about Sennacherib. Do you see that? And what it does for Hezekiah is lets him in on what's going on in God's mind and God's plan. Hezekiah, don't think for a minute that this arrogant, boasting Sennacherib is more powerful than me, that this is out of my control, that I haven't foreseen this. In fact, no, this is my plan. I've been telling you it's my plan since chapter 7. You going to listen finally? This is my guy. But just because he's my tool, don't think that he has my blessing. Because God can use people and use things, even though those people aren't doing things that are honoring God. It's one of the strange ironies of how God works in the biblical message. How does Romans put it? God works good for those who love him. That out of evil, God works good. Does that mean evil is good? Well, no, the Bible would say that's not true. But God's using it. Yeah, I know. Does that mean God orchestrates evil? No. But God's going to use it. And you see this happen a lot in Isaiah, and it's hard for the people to kind of grasp. Well, God, you should be blessing me. But you're blessing him, even though he spits in your face, even though he mocks you, even though he's arrogant, even though he taunts you. Yeah, I know, and that's a theme that we're going to see play out in the next 26-odd chapters. Got to land the plane here tonight. So we're going to get into the sign. We're going to get into more of what Isaiah has to say. We're going to get into the fate of Assyria and see how that paves the way for future things to come. God bless. See you next week. And I'm going to email this out as well. But 2 weeks we pick up. I'm out of town next week, so come and find another group if you want next Wednesday. Otherwise, 2 weeks from today, 6 o'clock, we're back in live stream community 2 weeks from today. See you in 2 weeks.